Hello, and welcome to Talking Social Change, a podcast by HoneyVic Productions. Talking Social Change believes in order to bring about a more just society, we must start with honest conversations with marginalized and ethical voices about important social topics. The basis for honest conversation is mutual respect, factual history, and objective truth. Because in order to understand where we are and where we need to go, we first need to understand where we have been. HoneyVic Productions is a nonprofit theater organization that seeks to amplify marginalized perspectives and works to transform dialogue into meaningful civic and social action. If you are inspired by what you hear on Talking Social Change, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this podcast. And visit honeyvicproductions.org to join the mailing list and donate to support the cause. My name is Ben Wang, your host for today's Talking Social Change conversation. Joining me is Juanda Hall, playwright, one of the founders of HoneyVic Productions, and HoneyVic's creative director. Juanda, thank you very much for talking with me.
Thank you for talking with me.
So let's dive into our conversation. What inspired you to start HoneyVic Productions?
Well, what inspired me? I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to feel like I could have an impact on the world. I think the thing that was probably most, not heavy, but inspired me the most was when President Obama became president. Right? And kind of what people would always say to kids, and you could be president too, just like President Obama. And I kind of feel like, or I felt like at the time, that's not really realistic because what's being taught in our schools it's not an accurate account of what actually happened. And it's not being taught in a way where the kids are really inspired to want to be president. So that really kind of propelled me to think about, trying to create something that would allow kids to be inspired and to inspire. And the way that kind of works out for me is because I've always written plays as a playwright. So it was just, a natural for me to then kind of move into playwriting and theater.
Interesting. Okay. Well, since you started with HoneyVic, you've produced 4 plays already.
Yes.
So you've been very, very active in your
Yes.
playwriting and your play production.
Yes.
Right? So your first play was Accelerating Change in 2019.
Yes.
For those who didn't get a chance to see Accelerating Change, can you give a summary of the story?
Sure. Accelerating Change is a play that kind of follows 2 families, the family of a slave and the family of the slave owner, and it kind of brings them forward in 4 different generations, 4 different time periods. And what it actually attempts to show is what did slavery look like back then and all of its cruelties, and what does it look like moving forward? Because I think it's easy for people to think about slavery as something that happened back then and not realizing the impact that it has on our world today. And that play kind of concludes with the two main characters that have moved forward with them having a conversation about what they've each inherited. So it's an interesting play, interesting conversation that inspires that conversation and does it in a way where everyone can be a part of that conversation, right? Because so often nowadays, people often feel like they can't be a part of the conversation unless they have a specific, perspective. So accelerating change kind of opens the door for everybody to be a part of the conversation to hopefully inspire some change. It was really pretty cool. It was our first play, and it was pretty exciting seeing this world that I created in my head actually on the stage being acted by fantastic actors. So it was pretty cool, pretty cool. Hopefully we'll put it on again one day.
It was a really great play. I was fortunate enough to be able to catch that play and watch it as an audience member. And it was very interesting. The dialogue was I thought was great. And one of the most interesting dialogues was actually at the last scene where the descendant of the slave owners and the descendant of the slave, they were able to get together and they were having a conversation, not a very heated conversation, I would say,
Yeah,
about each other's experiences and trying to understand each other's perspective. And I think the line that struck me the most was when the descendant of the slave said something along the lines of, "What happens if you work really hard and never get what you wanted?"
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So I guess that talks a little bit to the idea of privilege and what privilege, how privilege still exists for certain people in our communities. Is that what you were thinking when you were writing that scene?
yes, I was thinking about that because often, in me speaking as a black woman, people don't understand what my world is like, what our world is like. So I wanted to bring that front and center, and I wanted to have it be head to head with the one that is privileged to understand what that's like. And the young lady that was coming from privilege, the actor, by the way, was fantastic. There was a
Yeah, she's
line
great.
in the play where, because of where the times that we live in, the N word was in the play, and she was really not happy, using that word, but she did. It was fantastic. But trying to put it in the perspective of understanding what it's like to also be privileged, to have all of the privilege that you've inherited from your family who's owned slaves,
Mhm.
but not be comfortable with that, right? Trying to create the space for that group to be able to say, okay, I'm not comfortable with it. You know, what can we do? What kind of conversations can we have to actually kind of spark some change? So that conversation was very, very heated. They didn't come to consensus, but they both felt heard, which was actually, I think, in it was the only way that scene could actually end, that play could end with feeling heard. And I think a lot of what we need to do now in our world is to hear, not always talk, but hear what the other side is saying to see if there's anything that you can hold on to that could change.
Absolutely. I think that's a really great point about how the need for being heard is
Mhm.
so critical because nowadays it's all about what my perspective is or what the other
Right.
person's perspective is, right?
Exactly.
But there's so little understanding of what the other side is because nobody is listening to each other, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's a very, very important point. If you don't mind, I'd like to move on to your next play.
Hmm.
Your second play was called Amen, Amen. Let the church say amen. Can you tell me a little bit more about this play?
Amen, amen, amen. Because we actually did that play twice, and we're going to do it
Mhm.
again a third time. It's going to be Amen, Amen, the musical. But Amen, Amen sort of came about for me when I grew up in the church. I am very spiritual. And I was actually at the time going to a church in the Lower East Side called Trinity Lutheran East Side Parish. And I love the church because it's open. Come as you are, anyone can come. But contrasting it to the kind of church that I kind of grew up in, or the kind of churches that I now experience, I'm going to say in the Black community, because Amen Amen kind of takes place within the Black community.
Mhm.
And it made me feel as if we are, in terms of the call of the church and the Black community, we're missing something, right? We are so focused on, and this is just my perspective,
Mhm.
we are so focused on saving souls for heaven that we're forgetting that we need to actually have an impact on the souls here on earth. And that's what Amen, Amen is about. Um, it's also sort of woven into, there's a I wish I should have peeked back at my notes, but there was a really interesting short story that was written by an African American gentleman about aliens that come to Earth.
Okay.
And the whole point of the story is that they come to Earth and they say, okay, well, we'll give you all the riches you want. We'll solve all your problems. All you've got to do is send the black people into outer space with us. And so I took that story and kind of wove it into Amen and Men. So Amen and Men, it happens during a time when there are aliens that are here that have come to Earth and they want to take all the black people into outer space. Our government decides, but we really can't do that because it's going to be too much of an uproar. So let's send the homeless people instead. So the setting is they're taking homeless people back into outer space, and these various people have found their way into this church, and they're sort of like holding down the church. And as they're there, hiding from the aliens, they kind of start to talk about their experiences. They talk about racism. They talk about um, religion. About I'm trying to think of all of the things that are in the play, but they just talk about various issues, right? And so that's what Amen and Man is about. And the whole idea is that the role of the church, I feel, needs to be stronger. The church needs to be focused on making our lives here better rather than focusing on what comes in the afterlife, right? So that's what Amen and Man is about. And we did two versions of it. Um, um, and we're going to do a third version. It's going to be Amen Amen the musical because there's a lot of music in it. So we're going to do a musical version of it next year. Yeah.
So you said something interesting that I like to follow up on if you don't mind. You said that the African American churches nowadays are so focused on saving souls for the afterlife, for heaven, as opposed to and less focused on improving the lives of the African American community here presently. Why do you feel that? And do you feel that it's always been like that, or that's been a change that has happened more recently or over a specific amount of time?
I'm going to say that's always the way that I've known it. So I'm assuming it's always been that way, but just
Mhm.
from my experience, and it's sort of when you think of it, like for example, I think it's been my experience in the Black church that they're very, very, very against homosexuality.
Mhm.
Right? I don't understand that. That makes no sense to me because I feel like we're all God's children, and who are we to judge that? So, in my opinion, rather than being preaching against it, we need to be finding ways to, allow people to be who they are and be comfortable, right? And to help them, kind of navigate the challenges from the outside world. So one of the things that we explored in Amen and Men is racism in the gay community. And that was an eye opener for me. I don't know why it was an eye opener for me, but it was an eye opener. And so, when you think about it, so like in the Black church, we are against racism, right? We're part of the civil rights movement, but we don't support homosexuality. And to me, those two, how do how do you settle on fighting against racism but not accepting homosexuality? It was almost like a weird oxymoron kind of thing for me. So that is one of the storylines in Amen, Amen. Um, so, and again, this is just my experience. I'm sure some people are going to watch this and they're going to have a comment about it. This is just my opinion and my experience.
It's interesting that how, in my opinion, prejudice, when one form of prejudice subsides,
Hmm.
there's always another form. So my point, I guess, is that we should always be on the lookout and to tackle prejudice in whatever form it shows up,
Exactly.
right? Whether that be in the form of race, whether that be in the form of sexism, for
Hmm.
example, that's another important form of prejudice, or in the LGBTQ community, whatever form, religion, for example,
Right.
prejudice can exist in many forms, and we should never take our eye off of confronting it when it shows up.
Exactly. And that's sort of, I think ultimately what we're hoping to do is create a space to have conversation across barriers about that, about prejudice. So I don't want to have a conversation only with like-minded people. I mean, I would love that. It feels good, but we want to be able to have conversation with people who think differently, right? To see what things we have in common so we can actually kind of work together to make the world better. So that's ultimately, there's a poem, and I'm sure you probably know it. I don't know the name of it. Like when they came for this group, I didn't say anything because it wasn't me, and they came for that group, I didn't say anything. And when they came for me, there was nobody left, so they came and took me, kind of like that. So it's like that kind of, that thinking. We all need to be working together because we're all vulnerable.
Yeah, that's an important point. That's a great point. I'm going to move on to your third play, Wanda, because you've been very, very busy. You didn't slow down after Amen, Amen, because shortly after that, you soon produced something called another play called Acclamation, a play on work life. What was Acclamation all about?
Um, So acclimation was just about the experience of work and balancing, work and personal life. That actually came directly from my experience at work, where I felt like, there was a shift happening at a company that we worked at. When I first started, it felt very, very like a family. But then a shift started to happen where it became less about family and more about work. And there wasn't that balance. There wasn't, at one time, you knew everybody's name, you knew their kid's name, you knew their family. And we kind of got to a point where it was less about that and more about, productivity and profit. And thinking about, what can we do to make the company look better? And so acclamation was really about that. So it follows the main character who becomes a manager because they think he's black. He's not, but he becomes a manager and he moves up, and it ends up where a friend of his ends up accidentally killing themselves um, due to workplace violence, and he realizes that what's really important is not, being a manager in a crummy workplace, but it's really more about, being a good person. So he ends up leaving the company. I don't want to say too much about it, but that was probably closer to my experience, my work experience, than any of the other plays that we've done.
I can see your plays are very diverse. Your topics that you address in your plays are very diverse, right? For example, with Accelerating Change, it was about slavery and the generational traumas
Hmm.
from both sides of
Yes.
the slaveholder and also the slave, him or herself,
Hmm.
and the general trauma that progresses throughout the years. Amen, Amen is about different types of prejudice that we might experience in different communities, and then acclamation is about work and life and how do you comport yourself
Hmm.
personally in a work environment where you're still yourself, you're
Exactly.
allowing the organization to change you, but still doing what you still need to do while maintaining your own self. Is
Right.
that fair to say?
Yes. Yes. And it's so the main character is built based on someone that we both know. I won't say his name, but someone who actually decided that, uh, he wasn't going to continue working at a company that he didn't trust, he didn't value, and he left and went someplace else. Which I think is pretty cool because it's not often that we meet people who can, respond to a weird workplace experience that way. Um, but that character is based on a real person. He knows who he is. When he hears this, he'll know who he is.
So your last play, the one that you produced just last year, was called
Hmm.
Anger Potchkin.
Hmm.
I understand that Anger Potchkin was a deeply personal story for you. Can you tell me a little bit more about this story and what it meant for you?
Yes. So Anger Potchkit is an angry play that I wrote probably early 2000s. I was going through a moment in my life where nothing was going right at
Mm.
all. I was angry, I was frustrated, and I would actually every morning I would take like 5 or 10 minutes and work on this play. And in addition to all the stuff happening with me, there was a lot of stuff happening in terms of police violence. There was the Million Man March, right? Um, and and trying to find a way to be okay with all of the crazy stuff that was happening. Anger Potchka kind of came out of that. And it talked a little bit about that generational trauma from, mother to daughter, right?
Mm.
It talked a little about, or it raised some questions about, what's a good person, right? And so one of the main characters was a pedophile, but he was also bent on creating a way to move, young boys out of the hood. And
Mm.
so it raised the question, like, what's good? If he's a pedophile, but yet he's helping these boys to move out of the neighborhood, what do you judge him against? What's the barometer for that? Um, it also talked a little bit about the relationship between fathers and sons. How and this in Anger Potchkits takes place in the Black community. In case I didn't
Mhm.
say that before, and so it also examines that relationship. What happens to a young boy who grows up without a father, right? So it was a really cool play um, to write and to actually put up on the stage. I mean, it was really awesome because the actors embodied it. They were able to relate to the characters and the experiences of these characters and then build on it. Um, so it was really really cool. But it's definitely an angry play, and we really got good feedback for it. Um,
That's interesting. So tell me a little more about how the actors that you chose were able to relate to their characters. Because I did get a chance to see the play, and the actors were fantastic, or they were
yeah,
really phenomenal, right?
yeah,
And not being an actor myself, I just chalk it up to being a really good actor. But
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure, I guess, that if you are connecting to the character, that only exemplifies the role even more. So when you were
yeah.
rehearsing for it, or when you were casting and rehearsing for this play, tell me what the dynamic was like and why you chose certain characters for certain
Yeah.
roles.
Yeah. So, interestingly, there's this one young man, Jaden. He is going to actually we're going to be putting up a show, our Playwriting for Social Change Festival in July. He's going to be in that as well. But he played a character, who's angry, right? He knows that the other character, Frank, who's a pedophile and who's moving kids out of the hood, he knows there's something wrong with him, and he's like just kind of like trying to figure out what's happening with Frank. Frank is just evil, blah blah. And so we're rehearsing, and the actor Jaden says, I kind of feel like my character has had to have had some kind of run-in with the police. Maybe that's why he's so angry. And a light bulb went off because that made sense.
Hmm.
So we literally change, not essentially we changed, we expanded that character's arc based on the feedback from that actor. And then we then also added at the end, I'm not sure if you remember, but I had my debut on the stage from the booth with the microphone. We then added in him actually raising the question, how do you write a play about the Black community and not talk about police violence, not talk about, so it really opened up the play. And that came from an actor, because he really identified with the role and his experiences and also what he knew about what happens in the Black community. So it was really, really, really good. Yeah.
Really interesting. Wow. Wow. Real. What a great perspective. I
Yeah.
would
And he
never
he's
have thought
in
about that.
yeah, he's in our he so we actually do a playwriting for Social Change Festival.
Hmm.
And it's a program, and it's a two-part program. One part of the program is a workshop where if someone wants to write a one-act play about social change, we go through this workshop, they write their play, and then it gets entered into the festival. And the other part of the festival is the actual festival where we take, entrants or entries from around the world, from playwrights, one-act plays, and then we choose, and then we actually put the show up. So last year we did our very first one, which turned out really, really great. It's really cool. And this year we're doing our second one, and Jaden is in the second one. And we had rehearsal today, which I mean, I, it's going to be pretty cool. I think people are going to get um, really excited behind it. I think they are going to raise some questions in a way where people will be thinking about what they're seeing on the stage. And well, the four plays, so there'll be four plays. One of them is called Silent Farms. It's written by a playwright from Iran. And he's talking about what does freedom look like? Is it better to be safe in a cage? Or is it better to be out in the world and be free and encounter whatever challenges that may have, which is, so that play explores that. Then there is a play about mental health, um, which is actually interesting because it kind of talks a little bit about, the dialogue of this gentleman. Actually, the actors have expanded it to not just be the main character, but the other characters as well. How anxiety, depression, and your inner child, how those things play together in your head. When you have a mental health issue and you're trying to work through it. That's one play. Another play is called The Reckoning, and it's talking about reparations, which is pretty cool. And what's the fourth one? Mhm. I'm drawing a blank at the moment. Um, Reckoning, Silent Farm, Mental Health. I'm drawing a blank on the fourth one. We'll come
Well,
we'll come back to it. But anyway, but Jaden is also in the festival this year, and it's really cool watching him process through. We were working through doing some scene work, just watching him, and then some of the other actors as well working through how they're going to embody their characters. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with. So it's going to be pretty good.
it sounds very exciting. I can't wait to see it. It sounds super cool. When are the dates of the festival? Where can folks get tickets? Where will the festival be
Yeah.
held?
So it is July 16th through the 19th. You can get tickets on our website, honeyvicproductions.org. And I just remembered the fourth play. It's I'm homeless,
Oh,
not hopeless. And what that play does, it's a short play, and it's two main characters who are homeless, but it's like, they're talking about all the things that are happening in the world, in terms of civil rights movement, and all through that, they're still friends. And the whole idea behind that is to kind of, put across to people that, when someone is homeless, when you walk by someone in the street, there's
mm.
more to them than just what you see, right? So I think that's going to be
Yeah,
an eye
that's so
opener as
important.
well, because I think, we tend to think, well, actually, when we walk by people who are homeless, we don't really look at them, right? And I think
Yeah,
this play will give us an eye opener in terms of who these people are or who they could be.
that that's such a great point, and such an interesting topic and a very timely topic,
Yes,
especially these days now.
yes.
So very exciting, very interesting. I can't wait to see the festival. Let me go back to HoneyVic Productions.
Mhm.
You have all of these great plays. You have a festival coming up this summer. How would you like HoneyVic to inspire people in the future going forward?
I think probably in two ways,
Hmm.
in terms of playwriting, theater, and performance. I hope to, people feel inspired to actually put things up on stage that reflect all of the communities, all of the voices. Um, you know, whether someone's disabled, whether someone's black. Put plays up that actually, reflect, the world that we live in. So I'm hoping that people are inspired to do that. it's not a whole lot of money in doing it. It's not like a Broadway thing, but I think that, I hope more people do that. And I think the other thing I hope that we do is inspire people to have conversations with one
Mm.
another about the world that we live in a conversation that's two ways, right? You talk, you listen, you talk. So, and I think that's where change is going to happen. I don't necessarily have an opinion on the way the world should be, but I do feel strongly that the way the world should be is a conversation we should all be a part of. And I'm hoping that that's what HoneyVic is doing, by putting up these kinds of plays and involving various different kinds of people from different walks of life.
Well, thank you, Wanda. That's a beautiful vision. And frankly, that's what this podcast, Talking Social Change, is all about as
Yeah.
well, right? Having conversations and bringing about the change that we all want to see. It's
Hmm.
going to be good for everybody. That's going to be
Yeah,
beneficial for everybody, all parties involved.
exactly.
And that'll only come through conversation,
Yes.
right?
Which is harder and harder these days, but that's the goal.
That is the goal, and we should keep on striving for it because that is a worthwhile goal to achieve, right?
Yes.
So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Wanda, for this
Thank
great
you.
conversation. And we thank you for joining us today on the Talking Social Change podcast. If you were inspired by what you heard, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the Talking Social Change podcast. And please visit honeyvicproductions.org to join the mailing list, donate to support HoneyVic Productions, and also get tickets to the Acts of Silence Play Festival from July 16th to July 19th, 2026. It's being held at the American Theater of
Yes.
Actors in New York City.
Yes.
You can also follow the Talking Social Change podcast and HoneyVic Productions on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. The links are in the description. Thank you again, and thank you.
Thank you.